Hey there, this is Marlon from MarlonMcPherson.com, and this is the first in a series of videos that I'll be doing to help you start your own podcast for your business or brand so you can actually use that as part of your content marketing strategy to bring traffic into your website, bring leads in so you can convert them for your business. So I have a podcast myself, and what I'll be doing is somewhat going behind the scenes and sharing some of my processes and some of the insights that I have to be able to get you started more quickly and work through the ins and outs of everything. So on screen here, what you can see, this is my podcast here, Future Steps Creative. This is a podcast that I do on a regular basis. So I try to do it weekly. And this just covers everything to do with the overall content that I put out. I've got some notes here which I'm going to run through with you, but if you do need to get a quick overview of everything, I do already have a post over on my website, marlonmcpherson.com. Just head to the blog, and if you have a look for the post that says here how to start a solo podcast or do a solo podcast, it's episode 41 of my podcast, so the Future Steps Creative podcast. If you're a subscriber, just look for episode 41, and that runs you through the information there. So a lot of it is going to be referencing that information, but this is going to go more in depth in each individual section. So let me just flip over to my notes just here. So the areas that I would like to cover are these four key areas here, which is basically your show creation. So this is about getting everything ready and planned out. Then we have the recording section, and then we have post-production and publishing. So as I said, over the next few videos that I'll be putting out on this topic within the series, we're going to be basically using these items as an overarching sort of topic or subject area that we're going to look into. So in today's video, what I'll be looking at specifically is the podcast show design. So we're going to start with the concept development. So assuming that you already know that you want to start a podcast and you already have an idea of what you'd like that to be like, this is about actually diving deeper into each specific thing. I've got like 6 things here that I'm going to go through with you, and these are the things that you're going to look at and try to have some clarity around in order to make sure that your podcast comes out the gate with a strategy and with a solid foundation, so you can actually create the content and create value without having to second guess yourself, without having to figure out, okay, is this really the direction that I want to go with the content, or is this the direction that I want to go with the production, and so on and so forth. So we're going to go through the target listener, the topic categories, the format, the style, the tagline, and the CTA, which is the call to action. So you can take some notes. This is more of a theoretical type of video where I'm going to walk you through some of the key things that you need to pay attention to within these areas. So in terms of your target listener, with anything that you do with content or product creation, if you want to actually specifically target a person, a particular type of person, you need to document what that person is going to be, or who that person is going to be, and what their transformation needs to be. So you should already have a content strategy around your overall brand, and you should already have profiles of your avatar or your potential customer or target audience. This is what you're going to pull from to really direct your podcast listenership towards. So these are the same people that you're going to be targeting. So you just need to reference that and basically decide, okay, what you'll need to format, what you'll need to put into the podcast to target these people. Now, unless your podcast is not related to if your podcast rather is not related to your existing brand and is something completely different, then that's where you'll need to start from scratch and actually drill down into who the listener should be, because this is going to guide everything else that you do in terms of how you present the podcast, in terms of the content, in terms of the overall strategy behind it. So the next point here is the topic categories. So essentially, this is going to be buckets of content that you would want to put out on the podcast. And I did mention this in the first point that you do need to have a content strategy overall for your brand if you're doing content marketing. So you can either pull from that, or you might want to do some unique content for the podcast. For example, you might want to do bonus content just on the podcast, and that's separate to, let's say, your blog or your videos if you're doing videos. And that is going to incentivize people to actually listen to the podcast, because it's not just the same information being syndicated across. It's not the same content necessarily being syndicated. So you can make it unique in that sense. But there's also a lot of value to be had by actually sticking with the same content plan and just syndicating by repurposing the content from your blog or from your videos into the podcast, or just redoing that same content in that format. Because people listen to podcasts. People who listen to podcasts are not the same people necessarily that have the time or the capacity to sit down and watch a video, or they might not like to read posts. They might just be the type of people that are going about their day-to-day activities, and they just want to listen whilst doing those activities. So you're able to reach a segment of your market that you wouldn't necessarily be able to reach if you didn't have a podcast, which is audio only. So we're focusing on audio only, by the way, because this is the true sense of a podcast. Even though I do videos, you have the possibility to publish it as a video as well on, say, YouTube or other platforms that accept video. So the next thing that you'll need to look into is the format. This is going to be, whether it's going to be a solo podcast, as in you just doing it by yourself, like the way that I'm presenting this video right now, or it could be guest interviews, or you could have a co-host or a panel where you have like a roundtable discussion or a talk. And these can bring a very different dynamic versus one can bring a very different dynamic versus the other. So what you decide to do is completely up to how you want to, where you think you can provide the most value. Now, for me, I currently do a solo podcast, and I recommend, if you're just starting out, to just do a solo podcast, because one is that it's just way easier to do. You don't have to rely on anyone else. You can just get your content together, start your recordings, and go. And the second thing is that it gives you the opportunity when you're new to find your feet, to get practicing. And that might actually be a pro and a con in a way, because sometimes if you're doing it with somebody else, they can actually help you with the confidence side of it and help you make things flow a bit better. Whereas with a solo podcast, you obviously have to make sure that you are able to keep that going. Generally, you wouldn't want to do a very long episode, like an hour or something, just by yourself, even though that's possible. But you might want to do shorter episodes as a solo podcast, and then step things up later by having either a co-host or a panel, or just do interviews, which either any one of those are going to be great formats. Again, it just depends on what's a good brand fit and a fit for your audience, essentially. The next thing you want to focus on is making sure that you get your tagline down. So the tagline is going to be the value proposition. What is it that people are going to get from the overall podcast? So each episode needs to be delivering on that promise to some extent, and you want to bring everything together in a concise statement which you can reel off your tongue in a matter of like a few seconds. So the intro to my podcast, normally I say something like, this is Future Steps Creative, the online business podcast that helps you to grow your online business through content marketing and website strategy. And I say it in different ways slightly on each episode to mix things up, but the overarching thing is that I help people with website strategy and content marketing to help them get more leads online and grow their brand. So you need to kind of make sure you drill down on that, because this is going to be the guiding principle. This is the promise you're making to the audience, if someone's going to subscribe and listen to future episodes, they don't want to hear random things that are unrelated. They want to know straight away, okay, is this podcast for me or is it not for me? The next thing is going to be your call to action. This is really important to have your primary call to action or call to actions in place and or mapped out so that you can know exactly what the next step should be for your listener. So at the end of each episode or throughout an episode, you want to be able to tell the listener, this is what you can do next. This is what I'd like you to do. Now, if you don't have any elaborate thing for them to do, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It could be as simple as saying, hey, please share this episode if it's done. If it's provided you with some value and you know anyone else that it could benefit, then could you please share this? And sharing is a very powerful way for you to get more reach, because one person's network is going to be, much better to tap into somebody else's network and gain access to the people that they have available to them, and so on and so forth. It goes down the line. If you make content that's valuable enough and shareable, you could simply ask them to do that. So it could be that you want to send them also to a product. Maybe you have an offer, you have a service, you have a something that's going to help them take that logical next step. So for me, for example, I could say to you, because I'm talking about podcast strategy, that if you need some help with getting started with your podcast or the publishing side of it to figure all of this out, you can book some consulting with me over on marlonmcpherson.com, and I can walk you through the process one-on-one to help you get some clarity around what you need to get to. So you need to actually have an understanding of what your call to actions are, so then you can match them up. If you have multiple, you can match them up based on the episode, depending on what you're talking about. You can put the most appropriate call to action in there. So pretty much that's it. I'm not going to make this video much longer than it needs to be. In upcoming videos, I'm going to be talking about the other aspects of it in terms of the identity of the podcast, the brand identity, because it does have to have its own brand identity in terms of your look and feel, to be able to attract people to click on it, to say, hey, let me check this podcast out. It needs to stand out amongst all the other podcasts available within its category. So we'll jump into some of these things, and then we'll look at the other aspects like recording, post-production, and publishing, like I said earlier in this video. Now, in the true spirit of practicing what I preach, I'm just going to tell you about my call to action in this particular video. I've started to put together some resources over on futurestepscreative.com, which is my membership and online community where I'm trying to provide as much value as possible in a group environment. So do check that out, and you can join for free and get access to the forum and the community aspect of it at this moment in time. So you can post questions, and I'll be going in there and answering those questions directly. And also, if there's anyone else that is there that's able to help, they'll be able to pitch in as well. So do check futurestepscreative.com out. These videos are going to live there as well, so you'll be able to get organized access if you would like to. There'll be lots of different resources that I'll be putting out over there, so I hope to see you there. In the meantime, take care, and I'll catch you in the next video.